From hometowns to Tahiti, welcome to Playing the Field, the Bachelor podcast. I'm Ryan Field, the sports anchor here at ABC in New York City. Longtime Bachelor fan. We love having you here on the podcast. We love having Jen Matarese, our Bachelor insider from here at WABC in New York. Our good friend Gina Sirico, unavailable today. She's got tapings going on with the guys, right? The Men Tell All and all that stuff.
She's busy. I think she's got some screenings she's doing too. Maybe if she's lucky, she's at a red carpet event. She's always somewhere.
I mean, listen, she's out in Los Angeles. That's where these kind of things happen. And I'm sure she's getting a good, juicy scoop for us right now that she can share for us when she's back next week on this podcast. But Gina did have, and this is a big thing for us, she did have an updated interview with Joan. And I think this is a great time to hear from our Golden Bachelorette, don't you, given everything that has transpired here in recent weeks?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is a pivotal moment in the show. We're down to the final four right now. When Gina spoke to her, she was able to get some juice on this episode and what her thoughts were about who she eliminated. So.
And one of those people was Mark, and she offered some insight on that as well, right?
Yes.
So let's go ahead without further ado, and let's play the interview of Gina chatting with our Golden Bachelorette, Joan.
We saw you make the decision to send Mark home.
Yeah.
And I think, it was one of those things where I think it would have been like a Bachelor Nation's dream, to have you guys end up together. But obviously, it doesn't work like that, But talk about that decision and what it was and what you were feeling in that moment.
I mean, I certainly felt that it would be Bachelor Nation's dream. So I, looked at him in a special way, honestly. And I actually wanted him on this season when he was on Joey's season, when he did Kelsey's hometown visit. I texted one of the producers, the executive producer, and said, hey, if I'm the Bachelorette, he's going to need to be on the show because he's very cute and he's a great father. And I love those things about him, especially that he was a great father. I mean, he brought his kids through a really traumatic time in their life, and they all just seem so whole and good. So I really wanted to get to know him, and I did on this season, and he is a really special man. But I ended up sending him home, and that was a really, really hard decision, because we had a really good conversation on our yacht date. And we talked about the journey that we both had been still experiencing, even though it's been a bunch of years for him. It had been, I think, 6.5 years. And then I was in my third year of having, lost my husband, and he losing his wife. And we was talking about our journey and how it still was evolving, and particularly because we were suddenly thinking a lot more about it because we were on the show. And we had these really, really intimate conversations, and we talked about our healing journey, and that his came so much from being in the house with the guys and having these conversations. But what was missing from all that conversation I had with him was how I fit into it. He never really talked about him having feelings for me, or there being a connection. And I didn't know if he felt it, and I felt like I was getting there maybe, and I just didn't feel like I was it for him. So I went home that night after that date, and I kept thinking, something's not right here. I'm not feeling great about this date, and I don't know why, because he's such a great guy, and we had such great conversations on that yacht. But I just came to the conclusion by the next morning that he was having a great experience, but it wasn't because of me.
Yeah. It was you were the catalyst, sort of, being there was the catalyst.
I just had to face it. Even though I wanted it to be different, it just wasn't.
I love that you told him, at the end, I love you, I think, because I do feel again, great friendships.
Yeah, really great friendships. And again, you know these intimate details about people, you've shared the deepest things inside of you. And so your friendships are they become love. They really do. You love these people. You've shared really emotional things with them.
Going into hometowns, you've got these 4 great guys, and it feels to me like they're so dramatically different, and their experiences are completely different. Yeah. Talk to me about your kind of how you were feeling as you were going into this week, knowing that you were going to be meeting their families, and it's a big step.
So I feel like for us, for the Golden series of Bachelors, that the hometowns are maybe more important than they are for the younger people, because we have these like established lives. Like we have lives. We're not like the younger guys saying, hey, what are we going to do with our lives? Where should we move? What is our life going to look like? Like our lives are established. This is what they look like. And they include a lot of people, and they include our children and our grandchildren and maybe still our parents, but they are people that we're not leaving. And so going into hometowns, you really need to think, do they fit into my life? Can I picture any or all of these 4 guys in my life? And I'm going to see their lives now because I need to picture myself like living there part-time or being with these people a lot because they are part of our lives. So I think hometowns are really, really important, and you have to be, really, that is a decision. Those are decision-making moments about who you're going to choose.
You and Chock, when you're at his date, you have an emotional moment. He had lost his mom on the show. Yeah. You have this, this beautiful, moment with him. Just talk about that connection with him. I saw it when we were at the Disneyland date. He was so smitten then. I can only, he said it. His feelings have gotten so much more strong. Mm-hmm. So talk about your feelings for him going into that date, having that moment, and just going on from there.
I think that we both got to reflect on our feelings when he left. So his mom passed away and he leaves. And I think that certainly did for me. I kept thinking, he kept saying, I'm going to come back, I'm going to come back. I want to be back, I'm coming back for you. But I wasn't positive that was going to happen because I had just experienced that on the Golden Bachelor season where I left and thought there was a chance that maybe I would be able to come back. I just needed to make sure everything was good at home. And I never could. And I thought, he's promised me he's coming back. He swears he's going to do it, but he doesn't know what he's going to find at home. And this was an expected passing. His mother had been sick for 4 years, and just, the timing was really bad, but it was coming. It was imminent. But I was really worried that he wasn't going to make it back. So when he came back, that was like a pivotal moment in our relationship because I was really worried he wasn't. And when he came back, I felt this sense of relief, and I was like, wow, I really like him. Like, this is weird. I didn't know how strongly I felt about him until he came back, and until I was worried that he wasn't going to come back, which happened over those 2 days. So when we went to hometowns, that was important conversations where we had there because he was probably the strongest candidate in my mind at that point. I already knew how I felt to him. I knew how distressed I was when he had left. And you don't have an opportunity to have those feelings until something big happens, and then something big happened, and I was like, oh, crap. I'm not sure how this is going to work if he doesn't come back because he is in my mind now. And so his hometowns were really, really important. And the fact that they did a little memorial service for his mom, and that was really important to him because he fortunately got to have a lot of friends and family at that hometown. And so it was a really good time to do it. And it was a really special place, the hometown was. So, I got to be part of that, which was really special. I almost felt like I was a little bit of an outsider and that he was pulling me into his inner circle, in that moment.
Wow. That must have just absolutely changed.
It did.
Everything.
It actually did.
Going the other dates, we had Pascal, we had Jordan, and we had Guy.
Yep.
Expectations versus reality for those hometown dates. What were you expecting, and kind of what was the reality of it for you?
So 2 of them were the Chicago dates, and I had a little bit of an expectation for just the city in itself because my daughter went to college there for a couple years. So I love Chicago, and I expected to like it, and it's a big town, and there's a lot of action, and it's super fun. The Pascal date was done mostly outside of Chicago in a little town called Glencoe, and we got to go to a salon, and I know how proud he was of that he built this place all by himself, that he picked himself out of kind of the gutters in Paris and moved to America not speaking English. So he was so proud of that it was really an honor to that he wanted to show me that his place. And then I got to meet his family, and his family is kind of all over the place. He has a daughter who lives in Canada, the daughter who lives in California, the son still lives with him. I got to meet some of his friends. So that was a special date because, you see the Pascal that is, I'm wealthy and I like the finer things in life and I don't do housework and I don't do that. But a true test of who he is his family, and his kids are really good kids. The same thing with Jordan, he had this fun life in Chicago, and I had to picture if I fit into this because I did see that he had a really full life. He has 3 daughters, he's very close to them, he loves his dog, he's a big member of the community, does sports there, he, is on every team, he's a real athletic guy, he's out there. I needed to kind of see if I would fit into that life, like if there's room for me there. And then I went to Reno, Nevada. And Guy is one of 8 children, and he has 4 kids. So he has this big family, and I got to meet 4 of his siblings. So that's a lot. And I got to meet 3 of his 4 kids. So, you know, you fall in love with them. Like I had conversations with his sisters that like I could go to any family function now and feel like I was right at home with them. It's hard meeting the families. It makes the decision so much harder because you don't feel like you're just choosing a person, you're also choosing their families. Yeah. And you don't want to like think that they did anything that made you not choose that person. It's really hard when you get down to the last 4, those decisions are huge, and you know, you don't want to hurt somebody.
So let's talk about that. Going into that rose ceremony, you have to go from 4 to 3.
Yeah.
Talk about your decision there and just kind of how you approached it and why you made the decision you did.
We kind of had a slower start anyway. He was a little nervous in the beginning, as everybody saw, and how he made fun of himself. And that like just kind of put us behind a little bit on the, you know, our relationship. Our ice skating date certainly made things, kind of cleared all of that kind of junk in the beginning and, you know, established us a little better, which is why he ended up on a hometown. But I think we still were a little bit behind, the 2 of us, like figuring out where we were. So when it came down to having to, you know, send one home, you know, I knew what I wanted at the end of this, and that was somebody that I was going to, give it a try outside of Bachelor world. And he was the one that I felt like I wasn't close enough to that yet. We might not ever get there. And I didn't want to, I knew what I wanted, and I wanted to make sure I was doing the right things to get there.
That was a great interview. Good to hear from Joan. What were your biggest takeaways?
I loved that she actually wanted Mark to be on this show.
Yeah, that was interesting, right? Because didn't we kind of thought that was like a producer placement? So that was interesting that she wanted him all along, and I can't say that I blame her. He was a good character on the show.
He's great. I mean, he's just a great person. I mean, we'll have to see. Time will tell if there's more down the road for him in Bachelor Nation, whether it be being on the Golden Bachelor as the lead, maybe. That's my hope. Or maybe there's a Golden Bachelor in Paradise. Or maybe he just goes on one of these seasons to give some advice or be a friendly face.
I think he would perfectly fit in any one of those roles. And I have a feeling that is not the last we've heard of Mark in this Bachelor franchise.
Maybe we'll get a Joey and Kelsey wedding and see him walk her down the aisle.
That would be awesome, too. And I'm an ordained minister. I could get him married. We could just keep it right here in the ABC family.
Kelsey and Joey, I'm going to forward this podcast to you.
There we go. I think that sounds like a great idea. Speaking of nuptials, will we see one of the now final 3 get Joan's hand in marriage? That is the big question before we get into all the X's and O's, sports term, of this last episode. Do you think her husband is amongst the final 3?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think she seems, I don't know. Do you think she seems fully convinced at this point? I think she's hopeful.
I think she is hopeful, and I think we've heard her allude to this a couple times that she just doesn't know. And I think in the trailer for next week, she said she's scared. This is a big deal for her. I mean, where she's at in her life with kids and grandkids and perhaps having to move to Wichita or Chicago or who knows how this is all going to transpire. So this is a massive decision for her and one that I don't think she is taking lightly.
No, and I think, she has been married before. She knows what goes into a successful marriage. And I think she's just looking to make sure that their lives align. And I think she learned maybe something from watching Gary's season where it didn't ultimately work out, despite the fact that they say they loved each other, Gary and Teresa. And I think maybe that might have thrown her for a loop or put it in her head, you know what, I really need to make sure, despite wherever they live, that I could fit into this life and they can fit into mine, which is very reasonable.
Very reasonable. And we've heard her say a couple times, maybe she's not ready for this yet, given, she's still healing from the death of her husband. So there's a lot of layers to this. And I think the more we take that into consideration, you can understand why things are kind of unfolding the way that they are here this season. And that brings us to hometowns.
I get to meet these lovely men's families.
I'm so excited for hometowns.
It's a big deal. But hometowns look different for our age. All four of these men have, very rich lives. They have kids, and family is so important to me. At this point, I have Pascal, Chock, Guy, and Jordan. And I'm at different places with each of them. I don't think I'm at the love place yet because I'm very protective of my heart, but I'm moving in that direction. I hope this is a transformative week and that I will be in a really good place to have one, actual love.
And it starts with our man Guy in Lake Tahoe. And again, she talks about how she's feeling guilty and, and wanting to let go of her husband who has passed away. And that to carry that not only in your head, but in your heart, while also trying to put your best foot forward on a show like this and really open yourself up to a chance at new love and perhaps a new husband and a new future. That is a tough line to walk. I mean, we've all had exes in our lives, let alone somebody you've been married to or with for 32 years and they pass away. So I can't even begin to imagine how she's trying to balance all of that.
Getting families involved is just a whole nother level. And they've been including family throughout this whole process, but actually face-to-face meetings and brothers and sisters and children asking questions, because this is like it's their whole family that This is a change for. It's not just them.
Sure.
So it's a little different than when you look at the seasons of The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, where primarily they're single people. There have been some single parents amongst the contestants in the past and the leads, actually, Jason Mesnick.
Yep.
But, I think...
My favorite part of the episode or of that hometown was when she meets his brothers and sisters and they all start with the letter G. We have Guy and Greer and Gary and I think Gail was one. I mean, right down the line. As someone who has two younger sisters, I was very appreciative of the bond that he has with his two sisters. And they have that group hug and how they said that they're so happy to see him happy and, shining, if you will. And they can tell how much he feels, how strongly he feels about Joan. And even says he's falling for Joan, which I think for Guy, that is a very big internal revelation that he's come to that conclusion.
It seems like he had a very difficult time with his divorce, and it wasn't easy for him, and it wasn't always amicable. But it seems like he's in a good place now. He really wants love. He seems to love Joan. I mean, he's saying he's falling. He used that Bachelor code word.
The Bachelor code word.
Falling for you.
Yes.
But I think, I don't know. I think he could go the distance in this. We'll see.
There is a comfort that she feels with him. I felt like there was never any awkwardness, even going back to their date at her bachelorette pad up in the mountains, where they cooked dinner and he was trying to zest the lemon and all that stuff. I mean, I felt like they've had comfort from the word go, and I think that speaks to her. And, clearly he's well off. He's got a nice boat, lives in Lake Tahoe. I mean, that's not a bad new chapter for your life if that's ultimately the decision she decides to make.
Yeah, and he was very kind-hearted where she shared this story with his family about how he helped Charles L.
Yeah, right. And they were getting
that
emotional.
part.
Yeah, that was very, very cool. I thought it was interesting that they kind of like, when she met the family, when he introduced her to his family, that they kind of led with that story. You think it would have been a little bit more about them, but I think she was just trying to drop the point that that's when she knew she really liked him.
Yes.
Was when he did that for our man Charles. And, his sister was getting emotional during the story, so...
They really liked her. The sisters,
oh,
they
absolutely,
really liked her. And I think she fit in really well with his family.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a good match. Like his children seemed very comfortable with her. So I liked it. I liked what I saw there.
I did too.
Good, so.
I did too. And then she goes to Chicago for not one but two hometowns. I can't remember we've had a double city. And I was wondering if she was out with Pascal, if Jordan walked by, or vice versa. When she was out with Jordan, Pascal was at the coffee shop next door. Hashtag awkward. Yeah, of course you would.
Spoilers.
Spoilers, right. So he goes to. I thought it was cool that he brought her to his salon, his home away from home. Of course, you knew it would be.
I mean,
you knew it would be.
I don't know if I expected it that big. I mean, that's like a day spa. It's really nice.
And Joan got the royal treatment, and one of the workers there said, "Oh, he must really like you because you're getting the special." Basically,
I'd be like, "How many other ladies has he given this special to?"
Oh, trust me, I know you would have asked that question. Getting all the dirt. But Joan was feeling mighty special. That there's no doubt about that. And then she goes and meets his family, including his daughter, who is becoming very popular on social media. We've shared some clips in our Bachelor group chat with the daughter talking about her dad and, about the misconceptions that people had about him. And, not to toot my own horn, I did say he was going to be one of the finalists on the first episode.
Called it.
Caught some slack from my two. You didn't think what?
I didn't think he was going to get this.
I know you didn't, and neither did Gina. And you both kind of looked at me like, I don't think so. And I said, I don't know. There's something about him that I think she likes.
I think that he probably obviously shared more than what we heard at times, because there's obviously conversations they have that don't always get included. They can only fit so much. And it didn't really fit into his character, I guess, that they were building. And now it's like we're seeing this great guy with this wonderful family. Yeah. He's self-made. Yep. And I mean, who couldn't root for that? Who couldn't root for him in this? He seems, I don't know. I worry about the fact that they keep showing these segments where Joan's like, maybe he's not that into me. And it's like,
are they trying to throw us off the scent, as you like to say?
In that preview, we'll talk about that later, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and listen, and not that he's had a character transformation throughout this season, because he hasn't. You've never not liked Pascal. Maybe you've had some misconceptions about what he's all about, because he seems very superficial with his Prada shirts, and I love that they were driving the Bentley, the convertible, nice car. I think that there are some misconceptions about him based on how he carries himself. But the more she's gotten to know him and kind of peeled back some of these layers that we as the audience are now seeing as well, I think it's hard not to like him. I like that he's self-made, and I like that he can provide her a life that, not to sound cliche, a life that she's always dreamed of. I mean, clearly he's well off, living in Chicago. She's from Indiana, I think. Is that where she's from? Do we have any? We go to our esteemed research team. A lot of shrugged shoulders. I see some Googling going on.
Sarah's Googling for us.
Sarah's always helping us out, and we appreciate her for that.
She's not from there. Let's put it that way.
But I feel like she's somewhere in the Midwest. Is that fair to say? I thought she was somewhere in the Midwest. And we should definitely know this. Maryland, like I said, definitely the East Coast. So Sarah's saving the day for us. Going from Maryland to Chicago. That'd be a move.
Yeah.
You're going to the middle of the country, and that's something that you would have to consider. But I think Pascal offers her a great life in Chicago. Let's put it that way.
Well, even if you're in the same state and you live, my family's from Buffalo, it's like a 7-8 hour drive from here. So that's really far away. Whoever she picks, the chances of them being in her hometown are really slim, right? Sure. So I think when you enter this experience, you have to think, okay, how are we going to make this work with any of them? And I think maybe you look at splitting time, like a few months here, a few months there, and they look at that. I don't know. We'll see if they show us any of those conversations.
I hope they do, because those are real world adult conversations.
They are.
And to me, the biggest revelation of this episode, of the four guys, is when Joan says that Pascal reminds her most of her late husband, John.
That was touching.
Touching and telling. I'm going to drop another T word in there. Touching and telling, because you can see that, maybe this guy really is the leader in the clubhouse, sports term, at this juncture of this season. For her to make that comparison, I think is a pretty big deal.
Well, and she had said she wasn't sure of Jordan's full feelings, and same with Pascal. So who did she see the potential with to try to build off? And she felt, in Gina's interview, she mentioned that Jordan, even if she had more time, she didn't know if it would go anywhere.
Right.
So she obviously wanted to invest that time into Pascal and see where it could go.
Yeah. And, I know she has some kind of questions about Pascal really fully being as invested as she is, or frankly, as invested as Guy and Chock are. So listen, she's in it to win it, and I still think, looking ahead to next week, which we'll do in a second, I still think there's another level that Pascal can get to in terms of him being serious and a true contender for Joan that we haven't seen yet.
Yes.
So she stays in Chicago and then goes and sees Jordan. A little Chicago-style pizza, Lou Malnati's for the win. Can never go wrong with that.
Is that the cake?
No, Lou Malnati's is the deep dish pizza, which is as thick as 6-layer cake. It's Chicago-style deep dish. If you haven't had it, please try it. You won't regret it. Rainbow cake, another Chicago thing. I thought it was a cool hometown date, right? She's really showing him the best of his hometown. She gets to see the city, and then meets his brothers and his daughters. And, some of them feel like that he's not ready to get engaged, right? And I feel like Joan kind of had this suspicion about him. Not that he's like a playboy, but maybe one who's not quite ready to get serious like she wants him to be.
I think he just needs more time to really get to know somebody. And I don't think he doesn't seem like the kind of person that makes a hasty decision, especially when it comes to love, and the fact that he had been through a divorce that really rocked his world and his children, and they were clearly affected by it. So, I don't know. In some ways it's good they're honest, and in other ways it's like, you're kind of blowing it for him here.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, and it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? And Joan no doubt appreciated hearing these things because it offers her some other perspective. And Jordan kind of got some clues to how Joan felt about him when I think it was his daughters that told him about their conversation with Joan. And he was like, "Oh, this is news to me," type thing. So it kind of worked both ways. I think it actually hurt Jordan and helped Joan, or maybe probably that's
clarity.
Kind of some clarity on both sides. And I think that ultimately led to her decision. No, they did not cross paths, Jordan and Pascal.
That would have been cool.
It would have been. I don't know if cool would have been the word. It certainly would have been fun for us to watch.
He's just walking his dog.
Yeah, right. It would have been the first time all season we've seen Joan sweat, I'm sure. So then we go to Chock's hometown. And how could you not love that date in Wichita? You see nothing against the great state of Kansas, but you see the house, you see the kind of like the prairie land, and it just looks like
country.
It looks like Kansas.
Yeah.
It looks like Kansas as you'd expect it to be. They give her the red ruby
beautiful.
slippers, out of Dorothy, there's no place like home. So Joan was happy about that. But the whole thing with the mom and his late mom and planting a tree and what did he call it? It was not a moment of celebration, but
Memorial, celebration of life.
Celebration of life. Thank you. And those are very powerful things. Anybody that's been involved with one of those, especially when you lose a loved one, a parent, a grandparent, sibling, when it's a celebration of life where you're sharing great memories, and in this case, planting a tree, it's hard not to get emotional, and everybody was emotional. Chock finally got emotional at the end. Joan was emotional, and I think that only deepened her connection with Chock, knowing that he brought her into this kind of circle of his, a tight circle to honor and celebrate his late mother.
I mean, if I were her, I probably would have expected something, but this was like a whole event with a lot of people, and I think she seemed a little apprehensive at first, but she embraced it. Yep. And I think she really appreciated being included. And one of the things I loved that, I think it was Kathy, his fiance who had passed away, Chock's fiance, her father, which was so cool that they included him in this whole process because he's important in Chock's life, said, they're your family if you want them to be.
Yeah.
Like we're yours if you want us to be.
Yeah, right.
It's like,
yeah.
Oh, wow.
That was really, really cool.
And Chock's dad.
Chock's dad. That was,
Oh,
that was another awesome, as someone who's had a few father-son moments with his own dad, that one hit close to home. And it's one of those things, too, that my mom always says about her late parents. Like, no matter what age you are in life, they're always going to be your parents. Mm-hmm. So even Chock, who's 60 years old, a grown-ass man with kids of his own, is still coming to dad, right?
Yeah.
At 60 years old. And it just goes to show you, you should just appreciate your parents for every second that they are here, and you can always lean on them and rely on them. And in this case, he's picking his brain about the new love of his life. And his dad was like, I can see it in your face. I can see it in your eyes, how you're looking, that you're in love with this woman. And I think you should go all in. And I think he liked to hear that from his dad. And it was just such a cool, heartfelt moment in this episode.
They've really captured so many of these moments this season.
Yes, they have done a great job of that. That's an excellent point.
I loved hearing it from his dad, and I think it really gave him a nudge, and that's something that often either the families are like, oh, be careful, or you get the parents who are like, just go for it. And I think the just go for it advice, especially on The Bachelor, Bachelorette, Golden now, is the best advice, because you're not going to get another chance. Your time with these people is limited.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, we're seeing him kind of put on the full court press, sports term.
You're full of sports terms today.
Listen, I like to cross-pollinate the Bachelor and my sports
You're in playoff mode.
We are in playoff mode. World Series mode.
Finals
Yeah,
mode
World
now.
Series mode. So we got a lot going on here in the Big Apple with the Yankees and the Dodgers coming up. But yes, so it's one of those things where if I'm Chock, listen, he knows he's the last hometown because she says it was my final hometown date. So did she save the best for last? I guess that's to be determined. But listen, he shot his shot, sports term. He went in and said that I'm going to be like, I'm falling for you. I'm falling in love with you. Don't break my heart. Basically, pick me. Now, the question becomes, this is a term that you used as we were getting set up for the podcast, love bombing. Is he kind of... I don't want to say sabotaging himself, and I make this comparison very carefully because I need you to realize, you as the audience, to realize the difference between the two. I very much compare Chock to Devin, not Devin after the season and what happened with him and Jen. This was Devin that we knew on the show. Good Devin, who was very much in his feelings, Devin. I still can't get the image out of my head of him drinking alone at the bar at the hotel. Yeah. And in the middle of the afternoon, basically just getting wasted by himself because he's so, caught up in his feelings that he can't get out of his own head.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying Chock is to that level, but I do think, and listen, she ended up picking Devin, and we all know how that worked out. So I do think that Chock is maybe kind of gone a little overboard in terms of how he's doing this, but he's also 60 years old, and maybe he's looking at this as one of his last shots at love. I don't know, but I definitely think he's gone maybe a touch too far for my liking in terms of just being a little too caught up in all of this.
Sometimes the way he talks to her seems a little too intense.
Intense is a great word.
It's very
and
intense.
Even the way he looks at her.
It's very...
I don't want to say crazy eyes. I don't want to say it.
Tunnel vision.
But it's a little intense.
I think this process brings out that in these contestants too, because keep in mind, usually they have had their phones a little bit to talk to their children on this season, but generally they don't have their phones, they don't have TV, they don't have access to what's going on in the world. Their only purpose is to date Joan, and I think it would be hard for anyone to not kind of put them on a pedestal and become kind of obsessed with them.
Yeah, obsessed is a good word, yes.
And I don't want to say it like that because it does sound crazy to be like, I'm obsessed with you, but
No, but I do think compared to the other three guys, he is definitely a lot more intense. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah. Guys, the crier, like emotional, like
Pascal's the cool guy, and Jordan was almost too cool to the point where he couldn't really be bothered.
Jordan was the cool guy.
Yeah, he was too cool, and I think Pascal is kind of a cross between Guy and Jordan, and we saw Pascal crying a couple times. He cried when Mark left. So he can definitely get emotional too. And we didn't even bring up, I mentioned the thing about Pascal with his sons, talking about father-son moments.
So
I completely forgot to bring that up.
Look at the head of hair on that kid.
Yeah, very jealous. Full disclosure, very jealous. But But, he's just like, it makes me realize that I've been a good dad, and the son's crying and he's crying.
And Pascal, not normally a crier.
Well, he cried when Mark left, right?
Yeah.
But he cried when Mark left too.
This show really taps into people's hearts and emotions,
including ours, no doubt about that.
I've cried so many times.
I know. I mean, this season has just been tremendous, and we can't talk about that enough.
In my head, I don't know if this is a fair game to throw on the spot to you, but you got me thinking with calling Jordan a cool guy. I feel like he's the guy you would date in like high school or college. So could we rank these guys by period of lifetime?
Period of life? Sure. I think.
Like where they would be best suited to date?
That's a good question. I think I'm going to go Jordan in high school, college. Mm-hmm. And I think Chock is the first intense boyfriend that you're kind of serious with for a few years right out of college. That's where I'm going to put Chock. I think Guy is kind of the next guy after you're like, I don't want to date the person that's this intense. Let me date somebody who's a little bit more in their feelings and can maybe see my sensitive side.
Is that the one you have your family with?
Yes. Right.
Okay.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe you get married and have your family with Guy, and now she's in the second stage of her life, if you will, which brings me back to Pascal because
He's your number one?
He is my number one. I do think he's number one. I think she has the most fun with him. I think Joan, and again, nothing against Wichita, Kansas. I think Joan is in Wichita, Kansas looking at this ranch and looking at all the farmland around going, what the hell am I going to do here? She's an East Coast girl, a little more hustle bustle. You go to Wichita as opposed to going to Chicago. Chicago, I like to say, is like New York, only smaller. So you have a little bit more of the life that she might find a little bit more exciting.
But didn't he have a place in Florida too? Or am I getting that mixed up with someone else?
I think he does have a place in Florida.
So there's that.
There's that. But I think Guy was the guy you marry in your 30s, maybe you have a family with, which could have been like her late husband. And now she is ready for Pascal, who she, ironically enough, also says reminds her of her late husband.
I think all these guys are very strong personalities that, they come off like a guy's guy, like an open the car door, be the gentleman type guy, lead the way, not like how Mark was, more in the back seat, like you tell me you love me first, I'll wait for that, right. So I think she's been clear in what she wants. These guys are all very different from each other, but they also have certain things in common that were like, I think, tick boxes for her.
Yeah, no question.
Like check marks.
Yeah, and I don't think she likes them all equally, which brings us to the rose ceremony.
How are you doing?
I am good. I thought all the hometowns went really, really well, but the conversations were not what I expected.
So a bit of a roller coaster. Week.
It was, yeah. I thought I'd be a lot more confident in these relationships by now. And I feel less confident after hometowns.
How afraid are you, though, of sending a guy home that just needed more time?
Part of this journey is you take a leap of faith. And I thought I was prepared to do that. And I'm still not sure if I'm ready. I'm nervous about it.
We get down to the final four, and, she says that Chock and Guy are ready. And she has her questions about Jordan and Pascal. And it makes you wonder if she was thinking about Jordan going back to what his daughters were saying and how much that was kind of in the back of her mind and how could it not be. And maybe she had kind of come to that conclusion on her own, right? And then had kind of gotten the affirmation from his daughters.
They didn't seem as, I mean, they're a nice family, don't get me wrong, but they seem more like, just kind of like
and that's not a good la ha ha.
No, I mean, like they get together and they do things from time to time. I could be totally wrong here, but I felt like Pascal, even in some regard, and definitely Guy had like these family units like set up. Like they probably all do Thanksgiving all the time. They have this thing.
And I think we can say that about Chock too. There's no question about that.
I still feel like we don't know a whole ton about his relationship with his children. Like they obviously have a good relationship, but I don't know, like, how often does he see them? How often did they hang out? Like,
well, Joan said when she met the two, she goes, I feel like I know you already because all your dad does is talk about you. So, we haven't seen, we're not privy to those conversations, so we don't know. But it goes down to the rose ceremony. So you knew Chock was going to get the first rose. Mm-hmm. You knew Guy was going to get the second rose. And I think because we had already seen the trailer last week.
We knew Pascal.
Yeah, it was
still in.
because Pascal was yelling at the camera guys and everything else. So you knew that he was. So it didn't really have a lot of drama for me. We already knew Pascal was going to get it. But do we agree that Jordan was the right guy to send home this week?
I think so, especially based on what she said, where she said if she had more time, it probably wouldn't have worked out anyway.
Right.
And nothing against him. Like, she really liked him. Yeah. But it just wasn't. I don't think their timelines were aligned.
Yeah.
So.
No, I agree. And I think, she feels good about her final 3, and they get to go to Tahiti. Are you kidding me? That's one of these. That is one of the best. I know that is on the list.
It's on the list.
That is one of the best final locations I think the show has ever had. I mean,
it cost a pretty penny.
Yeah,
right?
it certainly did.
It's not cheap.
It is not cheap, but they found the money in the budget to send them to Tahiti.
Maybe Pascal demanded it.
Yeah, maybe Pascal. Yeah, Pascal was not going to. I don't even know.
Kansas?
He was not going to Kansas. If they were going to like Denmark or something, Pascal was going to be like, nah, that's not going to fly.
Now you're offending the Denmark.
I can't offend the Danish. That's the last thing we want to do.
All the poor residents.
Yeah,
Oh my
right.
goodness.
We like a good Danish. So we get to the trailer for next week. Mm-hmm. They're going to Tahiti, fantasy dates, which we talked about last week. No beds. In the fantasy suites. Get your heads out of the gutter, people.
Chock likes to make out.
Yeah, Chock's a heavy petter and a heavy maker outer. But yeah, so it's more of like she wants to have a deeper emotional connection, not a physical one, with these men. Totally respect it. So we're going to see more of that. The question becomes, what do we think has set off Joan and Pascal that has Pascal like wanting the television crew to give Joan some space as she's going through an emotional kind of breakdown?
I think it's what they kind of showed where they're on the beach and they're supposed to have this moment together. And I think John crept back in, and I think he doesn't want to be with someone who is maybe like having like not ready. Yeah. I think he senses she's just not ready yet, or maybe it's just she's not ready for him.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe they work through it. Maybe he just tells the cameras to leave and they work through things. But
it wouldn't be the first time we've been fooled by the trailer here.
Certainly not.
The Bachelor.
What do you think?
I think the final 2 are going to be. God, I want to say it's going to be Guy and Pascal. Is that crazy to think that Chock goes home next week?
No way.
No way. No how.
How?
Pascal's definitely one of the final 2.
Unless Chock says something offensive.
Yeah, or she realizes that this guy is totally obsessed with me and I'm kind of turned off by it. Or she realizes I don't want to live in Wichita, Kansas. Give me Lake Tahoe or Chicago, and I want to be there instead.
He's like, where's the bed?
I can't kiss you standing up.
Oh, gosh. I don't know. I mean, they're all great.
They're all great.
But
I like the final 3. I think the final 2 are going to be. I'm going to go Pascal and Chock.
Who's your number 1? Is it Pascal, or based on the trailer, do you change that thought?
I'm still going Pascal. I'm gonna stick with him for now. He's been my pick to win from the beginning, and I can't back out on my guy Papi Le Pew.
Okay, but when she met up with Chock in the hometown,
yes,
that was like, did you get that feeling where they were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're back?
Yeah, of course. And
she wasn't like that with the others.
She was not. But I go back to her saying that, Pascal reminded her of her late husband. I do think her connection with Chock is the strongest at this point. But you also just said something too a little bit ago that maybe we're kind of being misled in all of this. There's like a big misdirection coming because it just seems a little too easy at this point. I don't know.
He does own a salon.
Yeah. Pascal Scissorhands.
He was. He did.
Yeah, gosh. I wish we could have seen that again. I would love to see him cut somebody's hair.
Maybe next week.
In the salon. Maybe he will.
He makes her with the scissors, and he's like, leave her alone. Leave her alone. She needs a Band-Aid.
He's going to open up a new salon on the island of Tahiti. It's going to be great.
Wow, that would be the dream.
So your final 2 are, drumroll please.
Oh, I think it's Chock and Guy. Okay. I'm going to buy into the preview.
Chock and Guy are your final 2, and then we'll have to get Gina's thoughts next week. We are looking forward to that. So next week we have it's Mentel All and Tahiti next week. This is where I count on you as our Bachelor insider.
It may be a double episode. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it might be, which they typically do, right? They'll have.
Are we supposed to be? I'm supposed to be an expert here. What's going on?
Yeah, right. You can't go to Google for help
go to
here.
Google for
No, you can't go to Google.
No,
for help.
I know the Men Tell All is filming, I believe, this coming week. So that might
it might be the
week
following
after. So
week.
I think we're gonna see the fantasy suites.
And then we get down to the final
to
two,
yes.
and then it's Men Tell All.
Yes, because usually they bring the final third guy gets to come out.
That's a good point. Like Jonathan last season.
Yeah, they have that heart-to-heart.
Right.
They get some closure, and then she's ready for the finale.
That's a good point.
So
that we get the Tahiti fantasy dates next week, fantasy suite dates, and away we go.
Gina said her favorite episodes are the tell-alls.
But you know what? There's not going to be anything juicy in the tell-alls. There's going to be there's no drama except for you snore too much.
They fight. Well, this one, yeah, but normally I just don't love the bickering.
Right.
So it just sort of bothers me, and I'm like, I can't believe it's time for this. Can't we just get to the finale? But
yeah, this season I think it's going to be a very drama-free Men Tell All, but maybe more of a heartfelt Men Tell All, and there's going to be something we can certainly take away from all of that. But a lot more still to come on this season, and we are excited to bring it to you. And we're going to have Gina back next week. Thank you again to Joan so much for joining us via Gina on this week's podcast. For Jen, I'm Ryan. And don't forget to...
like and subscribe.
And subscribe.
Wherever you get your podcasts.
We are happy to bring it to you every week. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Playing the Field.